and welcome to another episode of the MovieGoers Talk Show. Yeah, we're starting out with some Springsteen, my favorite, because I'm all alone today. It's a solo ep. We're coming off of episode 16 with The Biddler and my friend Mr. Christian Watercut. We were talking about Deadpool and Captain America Civil War, and we're sticking with a superhero theme here because after I go through some movie news, I'm going to be talking about the recent X-Men Apocalypse, but we're gonna do something a little different today. We're still trying to work out the whole formula of the show. The past few episodes have been spoiler episodes about recent big blockbuster movies, particularly superhero movies like Star Wars, Batman and Superman, Deadpool, all those. Mostly superhero films, and I'm doing another one here today, but I'm going to start the first half of the show is all going to be movie news because there's been a lot of movie news, and I think it's really neat to talk about all this movie news, and because I'm really into it and keep people up to date. So I'm going to start off with that. Please comment, guys, if you think we should add anything to this show. I'm trying to do a few a month, like 2 or 3 episodes a month. So I'm doing one today alone, just to get another episode out there. And I really want to talk about X-Men Apocalypse. I'm going to do a movie review on my YouTube channel that is non-spoiler, but the one I'm going to do later in this episode is going to be spoiler-filled. But I'll warn you about that when we get to it. We're going to start out with some movie news. And again, I am solo today. It is just Ryan, Nilsen, me, yes. And I'm going to go into some of the news. I'm trying to keep it entertaining. Maybe I wrote a few jokes. Who knows? We'll see. Laugh. Laughing at the own jokes here. All right, well, to start out with the movie news, Daniel Craig is reportedly done playing James Bond, which is a bummer. I liked him a lot. Speculation for the next 007, who will it be? Will it be the Idris Elba, Tom Hiddleston, the guests Dan Stevens? I don't know, and I don't think anyone else knows, and a lot of people are guessing, but, the writer of James Bond was like, Idris Elba's too street just because he's black. I think he'll be great. My only issue with Idris Elba is that he's a little old. Daniel Craig is retiring from Bond at, I believe, the age 52, and Idris Elba's 51. So he'd be starting at the age that Daniel Craig just left off, which could be cool. Maybe we need an older Bond, but I'm just saying the thing I loved about the Daniel Craig Bonds, or at least the first and the third one, is that he was so fit to play this Bond that he was the spy. Like, he was in his prime years. Yeah, he was a little older, but he could do everything. And I really thought that was interesting with the action scenes and set pieces, especially in Casino Royale. So if we're going to get any Casino Royale film, we might need to go with someone a little younger. But I'm not saying to rule him out. So that speculation is going on. So now we go to the CEO of Lionsgate, John Feltheimer, has come out of the closet. No, he has come out and said that there are many possible Power Ranger sequels. 7, in fact. He's planning on doing 7 Power Ranger sequels in the works. My God, the movie hasn't even come out yet, and I watched those when I was a kid. This franchise is just being reinvigorated for my generation. I don't think many people are interested in seeing it unless it is in the tone of the rated R short film that was leaked with Katie Sackhoff. It was on YouTube for 2 days. It was, I think, 20 minutes, and it was like a hard R take on Power Rangers, and there was blood, gore, and nudity. It was crazy, but I really liked it. It was pretty awesome. So if it's not in that tone, I'm still a little, I'm not really sold on this Power Rangers film. I'm still kind of speculating on it, not certain for sure if I'm going to like it or not. Going to need to wait till it comes out. The movie is going to be released March 24th, 2017. Dean Israelite is directing it, and the news on whether or not Dean is actually an Israelite is still unknown. I'm trying, you guys. I'm trying to write jokes here. The movie's going to hit March 24th, 2017. Adam Sandler has another Netflix movie, The Do-Over. Who cares? Shouldn't even attempt to write that joke. In a galaxy far, far away, there have been recent reports of possible reshoots for the new Star Wars standalone film Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which is directed by Gareth Edwards. Rumors of a test screening with mixed reactions causing concern for some reshoots. Apparently, this film was supposed to be a lot like a war film. It's going to be a full-fledged Star Wars war film. And I mean, Star Wars, we've always had the stories of the Skywalkers and all that, and all 7 films we've been following that kind of storyline with the Jedi and all that, and now we're getting a solo film, and the first one is going to be about them trying to find the plans for the Death Star, the plans that Princess Leia actually gives to R2-D2 in A New Hope. So this film takes place right before A New Hope, in between Episode 3 and 4. And it's going to be a full-out war film. All the art, all the production art, and the trailer makes it feel like that. And we're going to have another female lead. I feel like it's not that big a deal that they're doing reshoots. A lot of people like to freak out with reshoots. I think reshoots are a good thing. With the film World War Z, the Brad Pitt zombie film that came out 3 years ago, they had to reshoot the last third of that film, and I actually thought that the last third of the movie is what made it a good movie. I actually ended up really liking that film, and if reshoots were the reason, I think it's smart to do that. Yes, they kind of cut out the actor who plays Jack Shephard in Lost. Like, he's just like an extra in the film now, and that kind of happens, but I think reshoots are always a good thing, because what if you don't do them? Then you just have like problems on the board. I know Suicide Squad was also rumored to have a lot of reshoots, and that movie comes out in August. Well, if it's going to help the movie, I do them. Plus, you just get more footage, and everyone's still here. Everyone's available. If it works, I would do them. I never think reshoots are that bad of a thing. I mean, yes, it causes a tiny bit of concern for the overall film, but if they just want to reshoot something to make it even better, I think that's always a good thing. So moving on from that, Sicario 2 has just lost its director with Denis Villeneuve, who directed the first one, but it's gained a new one. Director Stefano Sollima will do the sequel, and it does not have Emily Blunt. Emily Blunt was the lead actress in the first one. She is not in the second one. Stefano Sollima has directed a lot of TV shows. He is Italian, and the title of the sequel may be called Soldado, which is actually, it means a private man or a Latin soldier, while Sicario is the definition in like Spanish that means hitman. So that's very interesting. I love Sicario. The first one was one of my favorite films last year. It got totally snubbed for Best Picture at the Oscars. It should have got a lot of more award attention because I think it's a brilliant film. But since the title is Soldado, meaning private man or Latin soldier, I think that could be referring to Benicio del Toro's character, and maybe they'll just follow him in this one. More news. Brie Larson is considered for Captain Marvel, the very famous female superhero in the Marvel Universe, and the Captain Marvel film is scheduled to come out in, I believe, 2018. I think this is a brilliant casting choice. Of course, it's not confirmed yet, but she, just won Best Actress for the film Room last year, and she is a fantastic actress. We know she can lead a film, especially with very few characters. Yes, she hasn't been in a lot of big blockbusters. I mean, she's been in the 21 Jump Street and Trainwreck, but she hasn't really led a big action blockbuster. I think she could absolutely do it, and that is great casting. More superhero news. Batman v Superman is coming out on Blu-ray DVD at the end of June and early July, and they're having an extended cut, a bigger cut, a rated R cut, and they released a trailer for it with a lot of deleted scenes. It's going to be, I think, more than 3 hours long. And when I saw Batman vs. Superman, of course, we did a whole episode discussing it. A big complaint was how the film was edited. And I know a lot of films come out with extended cuts. The Lord of the Rings are notorious for having like hour extended cuts. Same with The Hobbit and all that. And usually, I don't really care for extended cuts because it just makes the movie longer. If you're a big fan of the movie, like I was for The Lord of the Rings, I was into those extended cuts because you just want more and more of that universe, and it kind of enriches the story if you're very into it. But then with a movie like King Kong, again, we're just following Peter Jackson here, I don't really need to see an extended cut of that. Or a movie like X-Men Days of Future Past, they had a rogue cut. And, I think the movie benefited from taking her out. It just made it, more concise and a better overall theatrical release. Now, I might make a special exception for Batman vs. Superman. I am actually excited to see this cut because I wasn't a huge fan of the film. And I think the overall reception of that movie was that it was kind of sloppily edited. I think it had a lot of cool elements. It just kind of, a lot of interesting story points got lost, or it sunk between the seams of the movie, especially a storyline in Africa involving a bunch of people who were killed. It was just kind of put there in the movie. And in this trailer, it looks like we're going to get more into that, or maybe that's the main storyline of the film. So we're going to need to wait and see. I hope they do have a lot more footage in there, but I just hope it doesn't feel like it's overstuffed or it has so much more in there. So adding this other footage could make the story better, but it could also feel even more overstuffed or inflated. So maybe if they took some other stuff out and put that in, we'll see what happens. All right, so that's all the movie news. I think the biggest thing was the Rogue One shoots and the 7 possible sequels for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. My God, speaking of Power Rangers, X-Men Apocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse. So again, here's a spoiler warning for this film. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to go into heavy spoilers. I'm going to spoil everything. The ending, the villain, all that. And why I was mentioning Power Rangers is because the character Apocalypse, he kind of looks like a Power Ranger villain. I'm not the first to say that. I've heard a lot of other people say that, but he does. So we're going to get full into this review, spoiler talk of X-Men Apocalypse. So first and foremost, you could say this is the 7th or the 8th or the 3rd installment of this universe because the timelines are crazy. You know, in the Deadpool film earlier this year, there was a big joke saying, oh, the timelines are so confusing. Well, because they kind of are. Unless you're really up to date on these X-Men movies, you're going to be a little bit lost as to where everything stands because we had the original 3, X-Men, X2 United, X-Men Last Stand. Then we had Origins. And X-Men Last Stand and Origins were not great films. They were awful. Very, very bad. And then we had First Class, which was a prequel, and that got everyone reinvigorated into the X-Men universe. They released a Wolverine standalone movie, which takes place after Last Stand and a bunch of years after X-Men First Class. And then they used the brilliant storyline of Days of Future Past to send Wolverine's conscious back in time, unite the First Class cast and the original X-Men cast with like a Back to the Future type time travel film, and then they just totally erased the events that happened in the original X-Men movies, had a clean slate, and they can refer back to those X-Men movies with that cast and that storyline. And Bryan Singer directed that masterpiece, which I call X-Men Days of Future Past. I love that movie. It's probably my favorite X-Men movie to date. It's one of the best superhero films I've ever seen. It was so entertaining, and them using Wolverine. I know they didn't use Wolverine in the comics, but that changing of that plot device really made it entertaining. And I gotta say, I missed Wolverine in this movie. He was not in it. I mean, I can't say he wasn't in it, but we're talking spoilers. He has a little bit of a cameo, but he wasn't a full, big point in the movie, and you kind of felt his absence. That being said, they introduced a lot of new characters. Or characters we'd seen before, just with new actors portraying them. Sansa Stark, that's all I'm going to refer to her as. That's all I know her as. She plays younger Jean Grey. And she just got discovered by Charles Xavier. And then we also have a Ty Sheridan playing Cyclops. You know, he has the laser eyes. Zzz, and I thought, did a great job. And then we have Nightcrawler once again. And we have the character Angel and Storm introduced. Now, okay, we'll get into the beginning of this movie. So what I really liked about this film was the beginning. They introduced a lot of these characters once again. And a lot of characters that hadn't really paid their due. Like Nightcrawler was in X2, which Bryan Singer directed again, and he was arguably the best part of that movie. The opening of X2, where he's in the White House taking out Secret Servicemen and trying to kill the president, was amazing. It's one of the best opening scenes. I think Bryan Singer's really good at making strong opening scenes in his films. The opening scene of Days of Future Past was amazing. The opening scene of X2 was amazing. And the opening scene of this movie, I really loved. It gets you right into the universe. You're sunk in. You learn who this Apocalypse guy is. It's in ancient Egypt. He's like the first mutant, and there's some people with powers, and he's turning his body into another body, and then this pyramid kind of collapses in on itself, and there's some kind of mutiny, whatever. You're in this universe. You know there's this guy, Apocalypse. He's very strong, and that gets you just right into the movie. Then it goes to the 80s. And before I get into any more of the movie, we got to address the time period. So X-Men First Class takes place in the 60s, and it really felt like the 60s. I thought they used that time period in the story very well. Like they had the whole missile crisis in Cuba kind of come into play, and that happened with Magneto and Charles. In Days of Future Past, it was in the 70s. It took place 10 years after. They used the storyline of who shot JFK in the film. I really liked how they used that time period. There is no reason this film was supposed to take place in the 80s. I don't even think it felt like the 80s that much. And yes, some people were dressed kind of funny, but you could not tell that this movie was in the 80s because it doesn't matter. I think the only time this movie kind of referenced that it was in the 80s was when a group of these kids were walking out of Return of the Jedi, and they say the third movie's the worst, of course addressing Last Stand, but this is like the third film in the new series with First Class, Days of Future Past, and this one might be the worst out of those three. Not might, it is. So it's just kind of awkward. I don't think they had to do a 10-year jump for this movie. I think this movie could have taken place 2 or 3 years after Days of Future Past. And I don't know, it seemed a little unneeded. And now there's rumors that the next movie is going to be in the 90s. And I just don't understand why they have to go 10 years. It's almost like you're locking yourself up. You're constraining yourself because now you can't go back to that timeline. I really liked when they were in the 70s, and now they can't go back to that timeline unless it's another prequel film. And it just frustrates me because Days of Future Past was so brilliant in that they got a fresh slate. They got a new group of things happening, and they're jumping 10 years. It's like, all right, well, that means the next movie, all these characters have to be 10 years older and look 10 years older, because a lot of these characters did not look 10 years older from the last film. So it's just kind of a weird plot device. Pardon me while I drink some water. Oh, my goodness. So that was a little odd. So now we're introduced to these characters. I love the introduction of Cyclops. This kid in class, and this bully's like, "Oh, you're looking at my girl," and he's like, "No," and he goes to the bathroom and then lasers the door down. Awesome introduction to his character. We never seen his character introduced before on screen. Brilliant introduction. Love the introduction of Sansa. Jean Grey. I'm only going to see her as Sansa. Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones. She was great. The beginning of the movie, I was a little skeptical on her performance. Like, she was just she was different than she was in Game of Thrones. And when you're so accustomed to seeing an actor in one role, it's kind of weird to see her in another one, especially as big as like Jean Grey. But by the end of the film, I really became accustomed to her Jean Grey, and I really liked her performance. And then Nightcrawler, and I really liked Nightcrawler. A lot of people were criticizing Nightcrawler as like, oh, he's trying to be funny a lot. I thought he was funny for the most part, and I really liked his introduction fighting in the cage with Angel, and they're like, oh, we got to fight each other, or they're gonna kill us. I really like that. But once that happens, and once Apocalypse starts recruiting all these other mutants, is where it gets a little sloppy. First of all, Rose Byrne in this movie. She was in First Class. She didn't appear in Days of Future Past, and she had like that little relationship with Charles in First Class, and then he had to wipe her memory. So they're trying to play to this kind of love story between the two. The only reason she's in this movie is to get Apocalypse in this movie. That's the only reason for her character to be in this film. She accidentally goes into that pyramid, lets the light come in, and then awakens the most dangerous mutant on the face of the earth. That's just sloppy. It didn't work well. I wish they had a better plot device to introduce him to the movie, but when that happened, I was just like, oh boy, that was a little lazy. So, yeah. After we are introduced to all these characters, and then we were shown Storm very briefly, Apocalypse just runs into Storm. He surfaces in Egypt. He's like, whoa, she used the lightning power to steal something. I'm going to recruit her. It's like, all right. Then he gets Magneto, and this is, again, I think the best part of the entire movie. We're shown Magneto once again, and the dude has settled down since Days of Future Past. He knew he did something wrong, and he's started a family. He has a wife, a daughter. He's laying low. He's working in a steel factory, which is kind of cool because he can move metal. And he's laying low. He's just trying to get through his life. He's raising a family. He's not harming anyone. And then people become aware that he is Magneto because he saves a guy's life when a near accident occurs. It was almost like Rudy. A near accident occurs at a steel mill. And everyone becomes aware, oh, that's the Magneto guy. We got to go kill him. And they approach him with like all non-metal gear and like bows and arrows. And tragedy occurs. And again, spoiler. There's a scene where, both his wife and daughter are killed by like a happenstance arrow, like a random arrow. The guy just like slipped his finger and an arrow went to both his daughter and his wife. And when I was watching the movie, there was a gasp in the theater. Everyone was very surprised that happened. And I was a little surprised that happened because this guy's been through so much tragedy. They just added more tragedy to his overall storyline. And then you just see how powerful he is when he takes his daughter's necklace. And in like 2 seconds, it goes through every single soldier's neck and kills all of them. Wow, what a scene. Very, very tragic and very, very like meaningful. I'd seen that emotional beat before with this character, which, I didn't mind because the first scene in the first X-Men film and in the X-Men First Class are just him. He's getting pulled away from his family at Auschwitz. And then in First Class, you see Kevin Bacon like kill his mother. And we'd seen the family loss emotional scene with his character before. So this was the third time we're getting that. And it didn't hit me as much. I did gasp. It surprised me, but it just didn't move me as much because we'd seen that emotional beat before. But they used it in the movie so that when Apocalypse shows up, it gives him a reason to join. So I really liked that scene in the movie because I understood why he would join Apocalypse and be recruited as one of his 4 horsemen. Now, if you're going to go into that much detail for one of his 4 horsemen, I think you got to do it with all of them. And they don't do that in this movie. They only do it with Magneto. He just gets Storm. Then that happens with Magneto. Then he goes to Angel, and the Angel one, was passable. He recruits him by, he fights Nightcrawler, and then he's like, listen, your wings have been damaged. I'm going to give you new wings. Okay, buy it. And he's going to show him new powers. So they give him that. The recruitment of Psylocke, played by Olivia Munn, who looks gorgeous in this movie, by the way, was so lazy and just thrown in there. I was kind of shocked because there's so many moments in this movie that are very detailed. Seems like a bunch of writers like hashed it out and got really detailed with the script and then just, all right, yeah, he'll just recruit Psylocke. Okay. No reason at all. Just, boom. One line. I think she had 2 lines in the whole movie. And one of her lines is there. So, okay, yeah, he's got his 4 horsemen. You still don't really know what Apocalypse is doing. He wants to take the world back from all the humans because he thinks the mutants should be dominant, but he's doing that by killing all these other mutants. And he wants the strong on his side, and it was just like, all right, I kind of buy his alibi, his story, whatever. So now let's go to the other side of the story with Professor X and all those characters like Beasts and Quicksilver. So another huge issue with this movie is that they're retreading or redoing emotional beats we've seen in the past 6 or 7 movies. Like, almost every beat in this movie I'd seen before in a prior X-Men film. So, with Professor X, with Jean, he's like, you're just more powerful than you ever know. That is like all of X-Men 2. We'd seen that before. Okay, I guess they're retreading it because it's a new universe, whatever. I'll accept it. So they let that happen. And then she's like, I saw the end of the world, and it's foreshadowing, yada, yada, yada. So then we get into, the 3, they're hanging out. He's teaching them. He's teaching Cyclops how to use his powers. And I thought that was a really funny scene where he takes out the tree and he's like, that was my favorite tree. A lot of the humor with Professor X, I think, worked in this film, especially with, him wanting to meet up with Rose Byrne and him with the other mutants. I thought the humor was very good with Professor X in this movie. But then we get into the middle of the movie. There is a 30-minute slump in this film where I just wanted to fall asleep. And I think I almost did because nothing is happening. It's just Apocalypse moving around, kind of recruiting people, and Professor X like moving around with his students. And it's very, very boring. To start so strong with like this epic opening and showing Apocalypse and then introducing these characters and then just have a 30-minute slump really hurts the movie. You need some kind of action in the middle of this movie. And yeah, we're spoiled with movies like Civil War and Deadpool, where there's kind of action spliced throughout. But it was just very, very odd to have a 30 minutes where nothing was happening on screen. Nothing was being done to like forward the story. I love the scene where he brought Magneto to Auschwitz and he shows him, listen, this is how you can use your powers differently. And then he gives like Archangel new wings and he gives Storm a cool outfit. But then he gives Psylocke this like stripper outfit. And I know her character in the comics is, a very flamboyant outfit. But Bryan Singer himself, ever since he did the first X-Men film, and people were like, why isn't Wolverine in his yellow spandex weird mask suit? Because that's not what Wolverine would wear. That's an outrageous costume. And I know people who are loyal to the comics get up in arms like, oh, he should be wearing that. I love Wolverine as a badass who just wears a wife beater and pulls out his claws. And maybe, yeah, the hair's a little weird, but it works for his character. That is how I vision Wolverine. I don't see him with the black horns and like the yellow jumpsuit. That's just not, it doesn't fit his character. This guy as badass as him would not wear that. So, and plus it doesn't fit in with the realism of the universe he created. The same goes for Psylocke's outfit. I think he contradicts himself by making her wear basically a stripper's outfit. She's wearing nothing. And I gotta tell you, I wasn't complaining about how she looked. It was just very distracting because every scene with Apocalypse, I'm not looking at Apocalypse or paying attention to anything he says. I'm looking at Psylocke. And she doesn't even have lines in the movie. Her character is so utterly wasted in this movie. It's almost like they brought her on set and she was like tweeting photos. I'm learning how to do karate and I'm using jujitsu and learning how to use a sword. She's got 2 lines in the whole movie. She's barely in it. I don't know what happened. Maybe her performance wasn't good and they had to cut around it. Maybe they just had to adjust a lot of the stuff with their script because her character wasn't needed, but her character was not needed. Okay, settle down, Ryan. Okay, so we had that. So now we hit the middle point of the movie where Apocalypse kind of he after Professor X puts on Cerebro, he becomes in contact with Apocalypse, and Apocalypse realizes, wow, there's a very strong mutant out there. And he goes and just tries to kidnap Professor X because he wants Professor X's powers. I think I'm reading that right. And Professor X, before that happens, is like there's someone out there that's very strong, and Jean Grey senses it too, and all this stuff. So then he just portals into the Xavier School underground, and then he force pulls Professor X, who's like knocked out in his wheelchair, and then they just disappear. And right before they disappear, what's his name? The guy who has the chest. Havoc shoots a lightning bolt or whatever at him, and then there's this huge explosion. And in a summer/year of superhero films with a bunch of explosions, you're like, wow, here comes another explosion. And then, right out of nowhere, comes Quicksilver, which, dude, he woke me up in this movie because I was falling asleep. My hands were coming off the wheel. We were about to crash. He brought me back to life. He revived this movie right when he came into screen. And, of course, Sweet Dreams starts playing. I loved his scene in Days of Future Past, and I loved his scene in this movie as well, because when everything's just exploding and it's all slow-mo and he's just running around saving everyone, I thought it was brilliant, especially when he was throwing guys. He was like throwing 2 students off the building, and you're like, oh my God, are they going to die? And then he gets like the bed sheets and they kind of land like a slide. I really like that. Everything about that scene was awesome, and it looked great, really unique. It's just something you haven't really seen before, and it was very different from the last movie. And you gotta love the song. So, again, the 80s. But then what kind of ruins that scene is once it's over, Ty Sheridan, what's his name? Cyclops comes back, and you realize his brother died. So the tone goes all over the place there. How do you have such a very serious, the first action scene in basically the whole movie, with them stealing Professor X, Havoc, just unleashing his power, and then you have this really fun Quicksilver scene happen for at least 2 minutes, and you're having a blast, you're laughing, it's very funny, and then legit, like 5 seconds after it's over, you realize, oh no, like this guy's brother died. Really, really sloppy with the tone there, and it almost makes me think like, I think they could have done that in a better way, because you're going from a lot of emotions there. You're going from like, oh, very serious, to this is so fun, it's really funny, to death. And it was in like the span of 3 minutes that all happened. And it kind of took me out of the movie because it just was weird with the tone. So, but then it gives him a reason, and what's his name? The guy who takes Wolverine. Oh, crap. I'm forgetting his name. Stryker. Stryker comes, knocks all the mutants out, takes Jennifer Lawrence, which we will get to later, takes Mystique, takes Beast, all the important mutants basically, and leaves all the other ones knocked out on the road, and takes Quicksilver, while Nightcrawler kind of teleports Jean Grey and Cyclops into the helicopter with all the other guys and tries to get them out. Which I was really into that. I was really into everything with those 3 kids. I actually think they should have been in the movie more. They didn't have enough screen time. They focused way too much on like cameos and unnecessary stuff with the villain. I do think they should have had more stuff with the villain. It's just like pointless scenes like him staring at a TV being like, superpowers. But okay, I'm going to talk about Jennifer Lawrence real quick. And I know it sounds like I'm kind of hating on this movie, but there are just some things that really frustrated me. Because you have an expectation with this film. When you see Bryan Singer's name, the dude has not missed with X-Men. I love the first one. The second one is like probably my second favorite. And then Days of Future Past, I think, is the best one to date. I love First Class. And that's definitely one of the best films. But my top three are two Bryan Singer films with X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men 2 United, and First Class. So the dude is really good, and coming off of, I think, the strongest X-Men film yet, I really had a high expectation going in, and I didn't expect to be complaining about this type of stuff. I didn't expect to be complaining about the costume of one of the characters, or the amount of screen time new characters got, because he's usually really good with that stuff, and it worked super well with Days of Future Past, so it just kind of shocked me how a lot of stuff that I think could have been easily fixed were not fixed in this movie. So, Jennifer Lawrence. I'm going to take a sip of water right before I get into this. Okay. Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. So she's in First Class, and I thought she was all right in First Class. Some of her line delivery was a little odd, and I love Jennifer Lawrence. I think she's fantastic. I think she's top 5 actresses working today. She's an Academy Award-winning actress. Love her in The Hunger Games, Silver Linings Playbook, American Hustle, all those David O. Russell films are fantastic. I've never loved her in X-Men. Now, I never hated her either. I thought she was great in First Class. In Days of Future Past, they used her character really well. And a problem I'm seeing with this X-Men universe is they are writing the story around an actor as opposed to writing the story around a character, which you should be doing. You should have the story focused around a character for a reason, not just because you have one of the best actresses working. You should not write the story about her character, especially what she's been as big a part in the past 2 films. Maybe she takes a back seat on this one. Maybe she's not in it as much. But she has kind of a big role in this movie, and it's pointless. The movie takes, again, it's 10 years after Days of Future Past, and all the younger characters with Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler, they're all like, I saw you on TV and you changed my life. That's the only reason she's in this movie, because she inspired these people. And she talks Eric down, which, oh my God, we'll get into that later. But her performance in this film is so piss poor, I think she just phoned it in. She phoned her performance in, and it's Jennifer Lawrence. She doesn't do that. I love her, but she doesn't give a crap. And if she did, I'm worried about her as an actress because her performance in this movie was awful. She did not have a care in the world. And one big indicator of that was how much time she was dressed up as Mystique. Jennifer Lawrence is renowned for complaining on putting on all the blue makeup and getting in the Mystique outfit. That's a lot of prosthetics. I mean, you're completely covered in blue, and she has always complained for the past 2 movies about how grueling of a process that is. Well, listen, you're in a multi-million-dollar film, okay? You're in a blockbuster superhero movie. You're gonna put that on, okay? You should be dedicating your time to the character. Did Oscar Isaacs complain? Did the guy who played Nightcrawler complain about that? No, they didn't. And they're in blue the entire movie. She had 5 minutes, maybe, while she was in the Mystique robe. And this wouldn't be as big a deal if the past 2 movies hadn't been her character basically saying mutant and proud. So she doesn't care what other people think. She should be Mystique. She should be blue the entire movie, really. Unless she's shape-shifting or camouflaging herself as someone else for the sake of the movie or for the sake of her safety. She should never just be Jennifer Lawrence. When she's at the school, why is she just Jennifer Lawrence? She should be all blue. She should be, hey, mutant and proud. It just didn't fit at all with her character, and you can definitely tell that somewhere in her contract for this movie, she's like, listen, I'm going to be in the Mystique garb for 3 days. That's it, because it sucks putting it on. Well, sucks! Put it on. You're this character. Either don't take the job or the role if you can't do what the role requires. Don't complain about it and not do the one essential thing this character does. The character's known for being mutant and proud. Why aren't you blue? Just really frustrating. Hated that. Absolute low point of the movie, I thought, was Jennifer Lawrence. So, I don't know. Maybe people would agree to disagree, but I was really disappointed with her performance. So, okay, let's get into my last big thing I liked in this movie. I know I'm going back and forth between likes and dislikes, but I'm trying to make it seem balanced here. I really, really admired what Bryan Singer did, again, with the younger characters, and then we have the Wolverine scene. And a lot of people were complaining about the Wolverine scene, but I kind of liked it because again, it's Wolverine, and it was really telegraphed. It was really telegraphed. Like they're like, hey, there's some kind of monster in that box. Well, what could it be? Some kind of weapon. It's like, okay, yeah, Wolverine's in there. Well, I think it's very dangerous. It's like, okay, yeah, Wolverine's in there. Why are you talking about it? But once he gets out and he starts just going like, crazy and berserk and taking out everyone, I love that in the movie. Again, it was another moment like the Quicksilver scene that just kind of like woke you back up into the movie and you're back into the story because you're like, oh, Wolverine's here. So yeah, it was a little like lazy of a plot device, but I really liked it. And then you have the scene with Jean Grey goes into his mind and they kind of mind meld, which is a little bit of foreshadowing to the impending romance in future films. So I kind of like that. And then he goes off into the woods, which looked kind of weird. But that was really nice. So I really admired that. And he was Weapon X. And, of course, the after credit of this movie addresses that. And we're going to have the big standalone Wolverine film. So that was my last favorite part of the movie. Because the third act of this film is a disaster. Not just the directing, it was the big fight at the end. For a movie that had so little action throughout, I was expecting a big, fun final battle in this movie, and it was a complete letdown. Like a snore fest. Awful. There was no big fight. It was like just Magneto floating, basically lifting things and then throwing them at Apocalypse. And then it was Apocalypse not floating, he was standing on the ground, but lifting things and throwing them at everyone else. And people complain about Man of Steel and how much destruction occurred in that film. Dude, he leveled a city, and we didn't even see a citizen. The amount of disrespect and just lack of caring for humanity in this movie is shocking. They didn't show one evacuation, one citizen leaving. They literally just showed the city being torn apart by Magneto, Apocalypse, and Storm, and they didn't show anyone leaving. They killed millions of people. Millions of people. It was nuts. There was an apocalypse, basically. And they didn't show any of them. No. There's such a lack of attention to detail. And the final fight was just so disappointing. I kind of knew that Magneto was going to turn on Apocalypse. And I expected a big brawl and fight out. Instead, we got a little bit of a fight in Professor X's head, which looked kind of cool. And that was it. And the way they take him down was like Professor X remembering something. He's like, our minds are still connected. I'm going to take him out. It's like, okay. We didn't have Magneto take him out? What? It was such a letdown. It's just things floating and then being shot at him. There was no big fight. We didn't get to see Archangel or Psylocke or Storm fight with the other X-Men. Everything was just so brief and just a huge letdown. And we knew it was going to happen. I just wish it would have happened in a more entertaining fashion. The death of Apocalypse was just kind of, yeah. And again, like I said earlier, every moment, every beat in this film is something I've seen before in a prior X-Men film. We'd seen, this is a character, the villain could have been so rich, but in the end, he's just a guy who's I want to destroy the world for no reason. He's the first mutant, there's no reason. He just wants to destroy the world. Okay, very generic superhero film, villain. We have, the love story, or not the love story, but the admiration between Jean Grey and Cyclops. We've seen it before. His struggle and everything with Eric losing his family. Seen it twice before. Professor X and Eric, he's like, I knew you were going to come back on our side. That has been every X-Men movie aside from the Wolverine films, is their qualm, their friendship, and him coming back on his side. They got to mix it up. We'd seen that before. That's how Days of Future Past ended. That's how First Class ended. That's how X-Men 2, X-Men 3 ended. They're all ending the same way. There's nothing different. This movie was just it's so forgettable. It's so utterly forgettable. I talk about Days of Future Past still with a few of my friends all the time. And I reference scenes. I reference the Quicksilver scene. I reference certain lines, especially the scene between Magneto and Professor X on the airplane. This one was just such a retreading of everything we've seen in other movies, that it was just nothing original. Nothing at all. And I don't expect that from Bryan Singer. I expect something very original, very different, and very memorable. And this movie's utterly forgettable. Now, of course, I did mention the scenes I liked, so I don't think this movie's awful. And with a year with Batman vs. Superman, I did think this movie was better than that. But not by much. It's still like a sloppy ending, and like riddled with just random ass cameos, references to old movies that were like 10 years ago, and it relied too heavily on that. It relied too heavily on everyone to know all about Jean Grey and the Phoenix and all that. And the final fight was just so disappointing. I think it ruins the whole movie. You leave the theater with a sour taste in your mouth because you're like, yeah, I'd seen that before, and not that epic of a fight. And plus, a lot of people died. Like, it's just kind of a really thrown together ending. And then they have like the close up of Psylocke, who does a double take back, like she's just walking away, and then she stops, looks at the battle arena, walks away, stops, looks back at the battle arena. It's like, okay, yeah, clearly you're coming back. Walks away. And why did she have two swords? She had like one like a metal sword, and then she had like energy swords. So why'd she need the other sword if she could just make energy swords? It made no goddamn sense. Sorry, I'm just ranting about this movie right now. Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy, Professor X, and Magneto, just phenomenal as always. But like, this movie's cast is amazing. It's amazing. You have so many goddamn amazing stars in this movie. James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Oscar Isaacs, Olivia Munn, Ty Sheridan, Sansa Stark. Like, the guy who plays Beast, Jennifer Lawrence. This movie should be amazing with this cast. And when you have like a lackluster film with stuff you just seen before that took like 2 or 3 years to make, God, bums me out. Really bums me out. So, I mean, I would have loved to see what an indie director could have done with this cast. This cast is amazing. And that's what we got. Oscar Isaacs. Like, come on. Apocalypse. I know he had all the prosthetic makeup on, and it was just kind of hard to see his intentions. I didn't really mind him as a character. People thought he looked like the Power Rangers villain. I didn't mind how he looked that much. Didn't mind how Quicksilver looked in Days of Future Past or in this one. They had the whole storyline with Quicksilver being Magneto's son, and that's never mentioned in the movie. How much better would the ending of this movie have been if, Magneto changes sides? He's going against Apocalypse, and Apocalypse, he finds out that Quicksilver's his son right before this happens. That's what changes him to go against Apocalypse. Jennifer Lawrence tells him, hey, listen, Quicksilver, this guy right here, he's your son. He just lost his family. He has this lack of family, no one he can care about. Now he has someone he could care about. So he turns his forces against Apocalypse, and then Apocalypse takes his son captive, breaks his leg. Like, how intense would that have been? That would have been an awesome ending. Instead, they're like, oh yeah, I'm not going to tell him I'm his son. Storm knows. A girl who you just met 5 minutes ago knows. You're not going to tell Magneto? Nah. What? Just made no goddamn sense. All right, well, again, overall, I said this in my YouTube movie review. I give this movie a 5 out of 10. I thought it was just, it's very okay. Very generic. Not much new here, but it's not awful. There's some cool scenes, some things you can talk about after the theater. It's fun to see in theaters with a bunch of people, but this isn't a movie you're going to be revisiting when it comes out on Blu-ray or DVD, or be talking about in the years to come. You're going to be talking about Captain America Civil War, and you're going to be talking about Deadpool. So that's the spoiler review of X-Men Apocalypse. Yeah, I got a little heated. I'm sorry about that, but I'm alone right now, and I'm just trying to talk about it in a civil manner. But yeah, guys, so comment on this video, tweet at Ryan Nils, and you can go to the YouTube channel Ryan Nilsen. Thanks for watching this episode of the MovieGoers Podcast, and tell your friends about it. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. See you later.